Hare Krishna, everyone.
हरे कृष्णा प्रभु जी धन्यवाद प्रणाम।
Everyone, pranam. Please accept my
हरे
humble
कृष्णा प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम।
obeisances.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to all of you. Thank you very
Hare
much.
Krishna Prabhuji.
Sorry for being away for 2 weeks, and I hope you had time to go to Goranga Center for the programs the last 2 weeks. In any case, we are going to be
Yes, sir.
continuing from where we stopped, and let's begin with our Manglacharan. ॐ ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मायं ददाति स्वपदन्तिकम् वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथं वितं तं सजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपदां सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्ता राधकान्त नमस्तुते तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी विश्वभानु सुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वञ्चकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभयेव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयम् उदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायश्चाभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टुकी कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नन्दनाय च नन्दगोपाकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः. Okay, so today what we will be doing is essentially continuing from where we stopped, but we will be looking a little bit at what happens after someone leaves his body. You will remember, you will recall from our previous class, this is where we actually stopped. At the time of death, one sees the messengers of the Lord of Death come before him, their eyes full of wrath. And in great fear, he passes stool and urine. All right. So, this is what happens to most people. If one is a devotee, then fortunately, the Yamadutas will not come, but the Vishnu Dutas will come and bring him back to the abode of the Lord. But if one is not a devotee, then there's a high chance that the messengers of Yamaraj or the Yamadutas, they will come and take over. And today's class will look at what happens after that. Okay, what happens after that? This is so succinctly discussed not only in chapter number 30 of Canto number 3, but also in Canto number 5, right? In Canto number 5, you have the detailed description of the hellish planets. In Canto number 3, chapter number 30, um, uh, uh, it's just a very brief description of what happens in the entire transition. But of course, if you want to know more, you can read the Garud Puran. If you like to have you like to read it, you can actually borrow it from me. I have the Garud Puran at home. It's in English, so translated. Okay. But first finish your Bhagavatam, then you go to that. I've also not touched it yet because I have not finished the Bhagavatam. Okay, so we get into today's class. Essentially, what happens when the Yamadutas come over? In fact, the human body, when the human body sees the Yamadutas, he or she gets very, very frightful, and therefore, many a times, the living entity passes motion, passes stool and urine at the time of death. And that's why sometimes the nurses and the doctors will tell the family of the patients that, let us clean the patient up, let us clean the person up, and then, you can claim the body. That's the reason. But of course, if it's a devotee, then there's a high chance that instead of the soul together with the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego living through the excretory organs, the soul, which is carried by the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego, or the subtle body, right, can live through the upper apertures. And if this person is highly spiritual, very, very, advanced, then there's a possibility of also the soul leaving from the top of the forehead. All right. So all of this is actually very nicely described in the Bhagavatam. So today we will be discussing a little bit about very, very little about the hellish planets. So the hellish planets are ruled by Yamaraj. Yamaraj is the son of the sun god. And Yamaraj resides in Pitraloka, okay? Pitraloka with his personal assistants. And what they are doing is they are just performing their duties according to the rules and regulations laid down by whom? By the Supreme Lord, right? So Yamaraj and his assistants are just doing their duty. And at the time of death, when the heart stops beating, the living entity, essentially the soul, the spirit soul, along with the subtle material body consisting of the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego, is actually dragged out, okay, by the Yamadutas. When the body is not fit anymore, when the physical body is not fit anymore to sustain the soul and the subtle elements, the subtle body, then the Yamadutas actually pull the soul out, drag it out, okay, from this gross material body, right? Um, Anyone, what does the gross material body consist of? What are the 5 elements? Just unmute yourself.
Earth, the first one, Prabhuji.
Okay, earth. Anybody else?
Fire?
Wonderful. Fire. Yes. Anyone else?
Water.
Water, air,
Wonderful.
ether.
Yes. And ether. When wonderful. Very nice. Okay. So, this concept of hell is actually made of a very high dimension or very, very subtle material energy. Okay. And these hellish planets are still part of the material universe. Okay. But they are not visible to the regular human eye, right? Just like we can't see the mind, we can't see, the ghosts, etc. We can't see all of these subtle energies. So similarly, we can't see the hellish planets. All right. But Yamaraj, he employs the Yamadutas who will bring souls of all living entities to Yamaraj for judgment, right? Except for the devotees, because the devotees are under the jurisdiction of the Vishnu Dutas. So the Yamadutas will punish and torment the souls based on what? Based on the orders of their master, Yamaraj. Okay? So once again, all living entities, including humans and animals, okay, they go to Yama's abode upon death, where they are judged. But the animals do not have the decision-making prowess like how the humans have, right? So essentially, virtuous beings and saintly people who have fully dedicated their lives to God, they are taken directly to Swargaloka, heavenly planets, also to Yamadutas, to Vishnu Loka or Goloka Vrindavan, right? And even people who die in the holy dham like Vrindavan or Kurukshetra, they are also described as avoiding Yamaraj. Okay, because Yamaraj cannot go to that jurisdiction. Right? He's not empowered. Those are like spiritual embassies under the jurisdiction of the Vishnu Dutas. Okay, so you can see some of the the torment or the punishments which living entities have to go through under the jurisdiction of Yamaraj. Okay, so you can see more pictures over here. So the subtle body of the soul going to hell is at the time of death, and essentially the subtle body is the person is actually given a subtle body now. Okay, because the gross body has been left on earth, right? So the soul, the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego, all right, the soul is carried by the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. So now they receive a new subtle body, all right? It's called the Yatana Deha, right? Yatana Deha, or the subtle body. And it's having the same shape as the previous material body, but this is now subtle. Shape wise, it's the same, but it is subtle. It is not material, which you essentially you cannot touch it. But why is this soul now given a new subtle body, or the Yatana Deha? So that this living entity can now suffer the consequences of what he or she had, exhibited in terms of the activities orchestrated on earth. Okay, so the soul cannot be touched, cannot be cut, cannot be withered, etc. Right? So then the soul cannot receive any punishment. No, the soul will therefore need a new body to somehow go through this entire suffering process of hell. Okay, so if the suffering of some hell is too much, all right, the living entity may just die, but all right, this Yatna Deha, or the subtle body, cannot die because it's made of the subtle elements. All right, so just imagine now, once again, when the spirit soul is dragged out, right? Dragged out by the Yamadutas, the spirit soul is actually carried by the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego, and it's given a new gross body called the Yatana Deha. This new gross body, this new subtle body, not gross, subtle body is given. This new subtle body can then go through the entire punishment process. Okay. I'll take a pause here to see if we have any questions. A little complicated, but this is what the scriptures explain.
So, Prabhuji, I've heard that the soul transmigrates into another body. So the subtle body actually takes the soul to the another body. So here we are seeing that Yatna Deha is also a subtle body. So the soul is already after death. It's been carried by the subtle body of that soul itself.
Yeah.
So then there's another subtle body of Yatna Deha. Is it?
I think it's just a morphosis.
Okay.
I think it's just a morphosis. Essentially, the same subtle body is now given, like a shape, so that this subtle body can go through the punishment process. That's my understanding.
Correct. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
So yeah.
I'm curious to know, so is the subtle body aware? Is there an awareness of the material body? Is there a awareness of, is it mentioned in the scriptures of the awareness of your activities and your consequent punishments that you go through at the time?
Yes, Mataji, because the subtle body consists of the mind, and the mind is a repository of all our experiences. And therefore, there is consciousness of what the living entity had performed, gone through, can feel, etc. All right. So the mind, the intelligence allows this person to experience it. Because in the event that there's no experience, then there's no learning process also.
Yes. Thank you.
Does it make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
It's
Right.
I mean, it's a
Yeah.
very basic question, but just for my
Yeah.
clarity.
No. I think it's a good question. But I think the foundational answer is the fact that the mind is a repository of all our experiences, right? But at the same time, what happens is, there are very, very few um, living entities who can remember this, because Maya Devi will make us forget. And therefore, we go through the entire cycle of new experiences. At the same time, carrying with us, right? Carrying with us our karmic repository, all right? So, while you are wanting to start afresh, right? Be a good person, follow the scriptures, etc. Our karmic reactions are still, binding us, are still somehow, you know, getting us that resultant um, acts of result, the results of all the activities which we had performed in the previous life, right? So although we can forget, we are made to forget what we have actually done in our past life, but the reactions are still real. Okay. But of course, there are some living entities who can remember, right? Some children can actually remember their past lives, etc. Okay, and I've explained this before. It's very well documented at the National Institute of Mental Health and Brain Research, NIMHANS, in Bangalore. Okay, so essentially, so this subtle body will ensure that this spirit soul and the mind intelligence and the false ego, the spirit soul, is not dying at all right? We know that a spirit soul does not die. There was never a time when it did not live, and there will never be a time when the spirit soul ceases to live, right? So this is exactly a proof of that principle, that it's always living, right? And therefore, even the Yamadutas, the Yamaraj, cannot kill this living entity, because factually, the living entity is eternal. But in this scenario, he is simply having to suffer the consequences of his activities of sense gratification. Okay, so now let's proceed. So Yamaraj is aided by his minister, Chitragupt. Okay, so we have Yamaraj, we have the Yamadutas or his assistants who drag the spirit soul out of the gross body and drags out the mind, intelligence, and false ego which carries the spirit body. And then Yamaraj is aided by his minister called Chitragupt. Okay, so what Chitragupt does is he maintains a record of all our actions, right? So once Chitragupt has taken down all the
वही वही
records, yeah, then
एक
the
मिनट मैं मेरे को ना क्लास
then the Yamadutas are assigned the job of executing the punishment on sinners in the various hell. All right, so you can see over here a very amazing graphical representation. All right, you can see this jackal, this dog howling at this living entity. He's given a subtle body also, all right, to suffer the consequences. You can see over here. All right, so now we begin by reading the verses from the Bhagavatam. So we stopped around verse number 20. So we'll continue from there. So you can see it starts with Yatana Deha Avritya, right? So as a criminal is arrested for punishment by the constables of the state, a person engaged in criminal sense gratification. Okay. So you have sense gratification, and the word is criminal sense gratification. That means you are gratifying your senses, but that is not as per the allowed regulations. Right? So, we have got these four principles which we are, supposed to sort of, adhere to, ensuring that there's no meat eating, there's no intoxications, there's no illicit sex, and there's no gambling. All right. So when we are leveraging our senses and gratifying them while engaged in these activities, these are called criminal sense gratification. Right? So when a person is engaged in criminal sense gratification, he's similarly arrested by the Yamadutas, who will bind him by the neck, okay, with strong rope and cover his subtle body so that he may undergo severe punishment. Right? So if it's just a spirit soul without a subtle body, then how do you have the neck to pull? Coming back to Anuj Prabhu's question, right? So that is why the Yatana Deha is actually, somehow morphed out from the subtle mind, intelligence, and false ego. So Srila Prabhupada writes an amazing purport where every living entity is covered by a subtle and gross body. The subtle body is covering of the mind, ego, intelligence, and the consciousness. It is said in the scriptures that the constables of Yamaraj cover the subtle body of the culprit and take him to the abode of Yamaraj to be punished in a way. This is very interesting. To be punished in a way that he's able to tolerate. Okay. So you see how painful it is. You are still able to tolerate, but it is, the epitome of punishment. Right? He does not die from this punishment because if he died, then who would suffer the punishment? It is not the business of the constables of Yamaraj to put one to death. In fact, it is not possible to kill a living entity because factually the living entity is eternal. He simply has to surrender, he simply has to suffer the consequences of his activities for the sense gratification. Okay, so easy to understand. Huh? So let's move on. Then in verse number 21, Kapiladev explains to his mother that while this Yatana Deha is carried by the constables of Yamaraj, he is overwhelmed and he trembles in their hands. And while passing on the road, he is bitten by dogs and he remembers the sinful activities of his life and he gets into so much of regret, and thus he's so terribly distressed. You can see over here, right? There are some viral clips going on about people deskinning the frogs, and then they enjoy seeing how the frogs without the skin on them, they are still jumping around, and then you see some chefs just frying a live fish. People in Singapore, some of them, they consume drunken prawns. What's all this, man? Right? So then we will have to suffer for all these activities unless, we get into devotional service and we repent to the Lord that please forgive us for all that has happened. And if the Lord so desires, the Lord can reduce it, right? And make it like a token punishment, or maybe even remove the entire punishment altogether, if the Lord so desires. Okay, so this is what the living entity goes through. Okay, so the dogs will bark and bite just to remind the living entity of his criminal activities of sense gratification. Okay, so here the chance for remembering and recounting his activities of sense gratification is given by the dogs engaged by Yamaraj. Okay, and Maya Devi is so powerful, man. She's just so powerful. She can just delude us. Right? She can just delude us and we will feel that it's okay, it's normal to be gratifying our senses. Right? So it's stated in the Bhagavad Gita that one becomes almost blind and is bereft of all sense when he's infuriated by the desire of sense gratification. Okay, I'm not sure about any of you, but for myself, I go through this. All right, I just forget everything. Right, one is bereft of all intelligence. At that point in time, you can't even make sense of, what the right is from the wrong. You know it is wrong, but you will still want to do it. I will still want to do it because I'm so attracted by the sense gratification. And therefore, I forget that I have to suffer the consequences also. Right? So you see, it's so deluding. It's basically just making me blind. Right? And therefore, it's so important to have this constant association of devotees, constantly listening and chanting the Maha Mantra, constantly reading, constantly partaking in prasadam, right? So this A, B, C, D association, the books, the chanting, right? And in whatever balanced time which we have engaging in devotional service, only that can actually help us, right? If we artificially try to, control our senses, uh, you can't do it for long. All right. But when we are in the association of like minded devotees who are also trying their very, very best, if we read the scriptures, there's a change in heart. If we listen to the Maha Mantra chanting, we listen to Kirtan, if we chant the Maha Mantra with clear consciousness, without any distraction, and if we engage in devotional service, right, with full conviction that the Lord is there to save us, then there is hope. Okay. Otherwise, we will forget that we will have to suffer the consequences of being blind. Okay, I'll take a pause here to see if you have any questions. Let's see who is on the call today.
There's one question on the chat, Prabhuji.
Yes, can you please read it for me?
Yes, Prabhuji. It's from Molly Mataji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. If we are punished by our bad actions in the hellish planets,
Mhm.
then what is the role of karmic reactions? We still face challenges in our current lives and say it is due to bad karma from past lives. So, how do these two aspects connect?
Yeah, very good question. I do not, I cannot give you 100% answer for this. But towards the end of today's class, maybe in the middle part of today's class, Kapila Muni will explain that sometimes, you know, um, these karmic reactions are not only to be suffered in the hellish planets or during the interim phase before a new gross body is given to this living entity. It can also, the living entity can actually even go through this on this planet. Okay? So there are two ways of thinking about what Kapila Muni is going to be explaining. Let me just go maybe directly to this verse. Okay, maybe. Yeah. So, my dear mother, it is sometimes said that we experience hell or heaven on this planet too. For hellish punishments are sometimes visible on this planet also. So Kapila Muni explains this, exactly what what you are saying, Mauli Mataji, that sometimes we don't even have to go through after death. We are already, going through this process of suffering for our karmic reactions. These karmic reactions could be from this life. At the same time, it could be from previous lives. And therefore, this process of Yamadutas putting us through this journey might, maybe I do not have the right choice of words, but my speculation is that it is not fully exhaustive. All right. It's not that, it's not fully exhaustive. There will still be some remnants. There will still be remnants which we will have to come with, whereby we are given a new body And this new body will then go through those sufferings. Okay, so case in point is, a person who has not been leveraging his human form of life, for spiritual activities, but he has always been just eating, sleeping, mating, and not even bothered about uplifting himself. So there's a high chance that this person, because he was just engaged in overeating, he may become a hog in his next life, a pig in his next life. All right. Um, so now just imagine this person has died and the Yamadutas have come. They have dragged his soul and his mind, intelligence, and false ego from his human body. And then he goes through the entire punishment process, right? Where the dogs are barking at him, etc. They'll be explained a little bit more. And then he will be given a new body, all right? A new body based on probably the consciousness at his time of death, and how he has been enacting his life, because the Lord is very kind. If we have been enacting our life in such a way, like how this living entity has been sleeping, eating, drinking, overeating, you know no proper conduct, and then, so what Krishna says is, he likes to do this, so why not I give him a new body, right? Since he likes to engage in this kind of activities, I give him a new body where he can continue to enjoy like this. All right. And therefore, he's given a hawk's body where he can continue to sleep in, in soil, in feces, etc., and enjoy. Right. I gave the example of Indra, Lord Indra. Momentarily he was punished to become a hog. And then when the punishment was over, he was requested to go back. But he says, no, 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 I'm very happy over here. I've got my wives, I've got my children, I've got an amazing, uh, playground. Why do I want to go back to the um, heavenly kingdom? All right, to Indraloka. All right, so short answer to your question is, Mauli Mataji, yes, the Yamadutas will make us go through some punishment, and then we are given a new body, and that new body will still have some resultant actions to go through in this life. Yeah. I'll take a pause here to see if Anuj Prabhu, Ravi Prabhu, or any one of you would have a different point of view or would maybe like to elaborate on this.
So what you said is correct, Prabhuji, that after we have suffered, our desire is still not there to go to God. And so our desires are still there to enjoy separately from God. So as you said, the Lord is merciful and he's given us another body, but we have our karmic balance, it's not fully exhausted, and that's why we have our new life, and that's why we have our new body. Again, we have another chance to again develop God consciousness and to develop love for him. But if we still again waste our lives into the same thing, then again we are doing the karma which we are doing, and then we suffer or enjoy accordingly.
Okay. Yeah.
Hare Krishna,
Thanks.
Prabhu.
Yes,
Just,
yes.
just to add on, the fact that this is this target audience are devotees, and the fact that we are in this class and we are hearing the messages of God in Bhagavatam, and the fact that we are trying our best to reduce our karmic reactions, that's a very good start. But I also remembered that this in the verse that the word criminal activities were done, and therefore there's some sanctions and punishment by Yamraj through his Yamadutas. So, if the activities that non devotees have done are through consciously done, that means done with purpose to do the activities and cause harm, then yes, to harm to others, then yes, they deserve that kind of punishment. But I think for us, the target audience being devotees, right? Yes, we have recognized that we have sinned before, but we are trying our very, very best to reduce the karmic reactions, and hopefully, like what you had said earlier, through Krishna's grace, hopefully, we don't have to suffer the punishments um, of Yamraj, and through the example shown in Bhagavatam about devotees, who had atoned for their sins through um, to the chanting of the holy name. Even in the last moments of death, I think we know the most famous example where he was calling Narayan, and then he was given a second chance. Of course, he had to make sure that he atoned completely before being accepted into the abode of the Lord. But I
Yeah.
feel that our target audience, we can feel this little hope, there's this sense of going back to the Lord, and hopefully this helps us a bit. I think some of us maybe are feeling a bit apprehensive when we hear all these verses, but I think there's a way forward. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yeah, yeah. The Lord is very, very merciful. Huh? The Lord is very, very merciful. But at the same time, if we know all of this and if we still engage in those activities, then there is a likelihood that the punishment could be even greater, Prabhu. For example, right? When we chant in the morning, we also recite the 10 regulations for the chanting of the holy name. And in one of them, the deeper meaning is that, if we were to chant, thinking that by chanting, even our future sins will be eradicated because of the power of the Maha Mantra. It's like buying an insurance policy in the event that, I do something wrong. That can have really terrible repercussions, right? So my Guru Maharaj will always tell us that, now that you know the truth, please don't do it. Please try your very, very best. But, Maya is so, 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 so strong, Prabhu. Maya is so strong. And, if even sannyasis can give in to certain temptations, right? We have seen many, many cases. Then who are we, man? Who are we? So Maya is very, very strong. She wants to ensure that only the best, those who have aced her tests, only they can go back home, back to Godhead. Otherwise, we will be troubling Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. Right? Sorry for digressing a little bit, but I personally feel that there are many gradations of devotees also, Prabhu. Now that I read the Bhagavatam, I realize that actually, you know, I do not know about all of you, but where I am is just like really scratching the surface with truthfulness, because yeah, it's easy, academically, it's very easy to say, yeah, this needs to be done, this needs to be done. But when no one is watching, how sincere I am, it's very, very, very difficult. All right. But then, we just pray to Srila Prabhupada that he will give us the strength. Okay, let's move on. In today's class, towards the end is going to be really interesting. Okay, so I'm going to keep the next 30 minutes for the prayers of the unborn child. All right, so can you imagine the child is in the mother's womb and he or she is praying to the Lord. Where have I gotten myself into? All right, why am I here? Oh Lord, I don't want to go back into this material world again. Please, I don't want to go back to the material world. And before that, Kapila Dev is explaining, all right, the entire growth of the unborn child. What happens on the day of conception, day number 1, day number 2, week number 2, etc. All right. The entire development phase of the fetus is explained. But of course, if I were to just, explain it to you, it's not going to be so interesting. So we have got a nice 10-minute video, which basically explains the entire process and the prayers of the unborn child. But of course, it's not every child who will pray like this, okay? It's not every child, all right? Sometimes it happens. Okay, initially, I was thinking every child, every unborn child prays. But then when you read the Bhagavatam, and also Prabhuji, who was giving the classes last week, he explained it's not every child, but there are some children. Okay, so we have completed this, and then we'll move on. Okay, so while carried by the constables of Ramaraj, he's overwhelmed and he trembles in the hands. While passing on the road, he's bitten by dogs, and he remembers the sinful activities of life, and he's thus terribly distressed. Okay, so right, and then from verse number 23 to 28, we can just read very, very quickly, because there's not much on the purport. So while passing on that road to the abode of Yamaraj, he falls down in fatigue. All right. And sometimes he becomes unconscious because he's dragged hot everywhere. It's fire, but he's forced to rise again. In this way, he very quickly brought to the presence of Yamaraj. Okay, so this is very interesting. Thus, he has to pass 99,000 yojana. All right, 99,000 yojana. It's like 800,000 miles. Okay, within 2 to 3 moments. So the entire punishment is like really fast. And then he said, once engaged in the torturous punishment which he's destined to suffer. So the entire pulling process, it goes on for 800,000 miles or 99,000 yojanas. It's actually 792,000 miles. Okay, so he's pulled, he has to pass through all of that, and within 2 to 3 moments. And then he said, once engaged in the torturous punishment which he's destined to suffer because of his activities. So this entire pulling process, the dogs barking, running after me and all that, it's just the introductory process. Okay, a lot more is to come. Then what happens? He's placed in the midst of burning pieces of wood, and his limbs are set on fire. In some cases, he's made to eat his own flesh or have it eaten by others. But it's all very, very fast. His entrails are pulled out by the hounds and vultures of hell, even though he's still alive to see it. And he's subjected to torments by serpents, scorpions, gnats, and other creatures that bite him. Next, his limbs are looped off and torn asunder by elephants. He's hurled down from hilltops and is also held captive either in water or in cave. Men and women whose lives were built upon indulgence in illicit sex life are put into many kinds of miserable conditions in the hell known as Tamisra and Andhra Tamisra and Raurava. Right? So under the scorching heat, the criminal has to pass through roads of hot sand with forest fires on both sides, and he's whipped on the back by the constables of Yamaraj because of his inability to walk, and he's afflicted by hunger and thirst. But unfortunately, there's no drinking water, no shelter, and no place for rest on the water. And while on the road, and while passing on that road to the abode of Yamaraj, he falls down in fatigue, becomes unconscious, but he's forced to rise again. All right, so yeah, that's what the Bhagavatam explains. And then, Kapila Dev continue, my dear mother, it's sometimes said that we experience hell or heaven on this planet, for hellish punishments are sometimes visible on these planets also. Okay, so after leaving this body, the man who maintained himself and his family members by sinful activities, he suffers a hellish life, and his relatives suffer also. Okay, a token, because they are using the wealth which he has gathered by his illicit activities. Okay, so there's also karma in that wealth. So the mistake of modern civilization is that man does not believe in the next life, but whether he believes or not, the next life is there, and one has to suffer if one does not lead a responsible life in terms of the injunctions of the authoritative principles. Lower species or species lower than human beings, they are not responsible for their actions. All right? Because they are made to act in a certain way. A dog's work is to bite and bark. All right? But in the developed life of human consciousness, where we are provided this independence, this decision making process, all right, if one is not responsible for the activities, then he's sure to get a hellish life, as described here. Right? So animals, no, they don't have to, there's no karma for them. It's only for the humans, because Krishna has given us that independence, that minute independence. So he goes alone to the darkest regions of hell after quitting the present body, and the money he acquired by envying other living entities. What is that money? It is the passage money with which he leaves the body. So there's something really interesting by Chanakya Pandit, right? So the direct offender is more responsible for the sinful activities than the indirect enjoyer, right? So for example, if I were to steal, right, or loot people, right, and I keep $1 million, but sadly I don't live to enjoy this $1 million. So I hand it over to my children. My children are the indirect enjoyers. They still are getting the sin for it, but not as much as I would have, incurred. So the great learned Chanakya Pandit says, therefore, that whatever one has in his possession had better been spent for the cause of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because one cannot take his possessions with him. There's a joke that the biggest giver, who is the biggest giver? Who is the biggest donor? The biggest donor, all right, is the stingiest person, because at the time of death, everything he has to give away. Right? Because one cannot take his possessions with him. They remain here and they will be lost here. Either we leave the money or the money will leave us. But we will be separated. So therefore, the best use of our wealth, as long as it's within our possession, is to spend it, all right, in Krishna conscious activities, in orchestrating so that our family can become devotees, or serving other devotees, right? Using it for prasad distribution, for distributing of books, etc. That's how we can actually leverage our money. But of course, that doesn't mean everything is to be given away. No, no, no. Be a responsible parent, all right? Use the money to, develop our children, the family, etc. Provide them a nice place to practice Krishna consciousness. But then we should not get into this hoarding mentality, all right? Because at the end of the day, everything is taken away. So having gone through all the miserable hellish conditions and having passed in a regular order through the lowest form of animal life prior to human birth, and having thus been purged of his sins, one is reborn again as a human being on this earth. Okay, so that comes to the end of chapter number 30. All right. So purged of his sins, but the remnant sins will still, the reactions will still continue in this life. Right? Coming to Mauli Mataji's question. Okay. Any final points from any of you before we move on to the next chapter and watch the long video?
Buji, there's a in the image there was a character towards from the right second. I was just curious about
This one?
no the image of being taken to the Yamaraja's abode. Yeah, you see the second from the right,
Uh-huh.
your left probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the role of that? Like, how is it being described? Is it enticing? It looks like an enticing kind of an image.
Yeah.
It was just
Or maybe, it could
enticing
be,
the
yeah, it could be, um, I don't know. I'm speculating. It could be someone whom I had bullied in this life, or whom I had, caused a lot of trouble to. That person is laughing his heart out. Ha ha ha.
Oh, I see. Because he seems to be distracting
The
the
Yamadutas.
yeah, the Yamadutas, right? So I
It
was
could,
just
yeah,
curious, what is the interpretation of that? And then the other being that, in line with what Anuj Prabhu said about consciousness,
yeah.
about in the process to connect to the supreme eventually, that's the end goal. The remnants of those sinful activities still remain as reactions in this life. So I
Uh-huh.
think Lord's mercy is there if you are have the, I mean, this is, I'm saying from my own
Mm-hmm.
case in point, that if you are wanting and seeking, then Prabhu's mercy is there to show you constantly why those sufferings exist,
Mm.
and then in line with what you said, you will, there'll always be a juggle where Maya will try to push you back, but not to the point that if you're constantly still connected through association or through chanting, then you will still be given opportunities. This I'm saying on a daily basis. I find that
Very
so
true, Mataji.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so
I
amazing. Like, you're not
correct.
let you it, say you move towards Maya more, right? You tend to forget. It's not that you are left out. As long as you still suppose check off going or chant to the in association and chanting, then you immediately see what happened and what transpired and how you need to step up that one fraction towards the Lord, right? So I think that's why the suffering exists. That's why these reactions, in spite of, uh, say, purging your sins, you still have that, so that eventually the end goal is to get closer to the Lord.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
exactly, exactly. Couldn't have said it better.
Thank you.
That in the
Only
Chaitanya
thing is,
Charitamrita.
when I think of someone like, say, Elon Musk, who seems to be the richest person on earth, which means
Mhm.
that essentially he might have done something wonderful in his past life, then how come after reaching to that level, you can then start doing, how do you lose your consciousness to the point that you miss that you're supposed to go upwards from there, right? How come you sometimes see cases where people seem to have it all and then you go downward? That's the part where then kind of brings doubt to what I said earlier. Yeah.
Well,
Is it that
don't
you
don't don't
can
have to
you
don't
can
have to doubt it, Mataji. Don't have to
yeah.
doubt it, because I think it fortifies this whole principle that Maya is so strong. Number one, it
Hmm.
fortifies this whole principle that this person is not fortunate to have met the devotees. Unlike Steve Jobs, Steve
Like,
Jobs, in his commencement ceremony speech at the Stanford University, he says, I'm ever grateful to the Hare Krishnas because at my lowest, I used to walk 5 miles just to get a decent Hare Krishna feast on a daily basis.
so
All
that's
right.
why
So,
I'm intrigued. So imagine Steve Jobs had the fortune of seeing this,
uh-huh.
connecting it with something that he had inside him. Whereas, say, hypothetically, Elon Musk also must have come around the association of such people, but he didn't even pick it in his radar. Then what
Uh-huh.
is that one aspect that makes, as a soul,
Uh-huh.
what happened differently, say, in Steve Jobs, who was able to connect with this, and
Hmm?
Elon must not connect with
Oh,
something that he might have been exposed to. So is
okay.
it mercy of the Lord? That
Yeah. You answered the question. Is 2 points, Mataji. Number one is Shukrati, which is essentially how we have enacted our lives, and whether the blessing is there to actually receive this mercy. All right. That's number one. Number two, Maya is so strong, but at the same time, Krishna has given us that independence. So now Elon Musk can decide that is my life all about making much more wealth, and being satisfied with all of that? Or is my life also to look out for the other element of Sanatan Dharma? One is my Swadharma, all right, to ensure that people who are working under me, they have got their jobs, I'm doing my very, very best for the community, etc. But then that is going to constantly keep you in check in this material world. But when you engage in your Sanatan Dharma, which is essentially understanding what is the constitutional position of the soul, then you can actually come out of this cycle of birth and death. So, therefore, the Sukriti may be there, but this person is thinking, all right, I'm sure he would have met the devotees. The Beatles met them, right? I'm sure he must have met the devotees, but that independence which he has tells him that this is not important at this stage. All right. Spirituality is not important. I will live eternally. All right. Forget about Earth. I want to conquer the outer planets. All right. So he's given this independence by God, and God is just watching. Right. So now coming back to your earlier question, how come he has got so much of wealth and all that? So Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, right, that even though a person engaged in the practice of yoga may not finish perfectly, and he may fall down for some reason or another, his next life as a human being is guaranteed. Point number one. And then, if one has sort of, you know, not fully perfected, but has practiced, spirituality, the yoga processes, he may be given a chance in his next life to take birth in a very rich family, a very, very pious family, or he may be provided that providence as time goes by. Right? So even that is explained in the Bhagavad Gita, that sometimes why are someone, I don't think Elon Musk is born in a very rich family, but the wealth was, somehow, was, the wealth flourished in his case. Could be his karma too. Could be that, he has done amazing deeds in his past life, but now he's not practicing that independence. Yeah. So number one is the Sukriti, and number two is your individual independence, Mataji.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
now let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter number 31. Anyone else? Any questions or any? I see some chats coming in. Okay, we have to change slide. Krishnan Prabhu, you said you have to change slide, matlab?
Yeah, that time you were on a
Oh, okay.
different slide and you were speaking on a different slide.
ठीक है.
That particular moment. Okay,
Oh, okay.
no worries.
All right, Prabhu. Okay, let's watch this video. Give me a minute. What happened? Give me a minute. It's wrong. Okay, let me close some windows. I think it's too many windows open. Okay, Anuj Prabhu, please tell me if you can hear the volume. Yeah.
Yes, Prabhuji can hear.
Okay. So yeah, just pay attention, everyone, and read what's on the screen. Okay.
And when the body is no more usable, then the body is finished, and the soul again enters another body. This is called transmigration. What is the next body you are going to get? You must have information.
actually in the middle of the workshop right now, sleeping. This is your first lesson, I'm sure.
Okay, how was the video? Rasija Mataji?
It was phenomenal. I mean, so many questions, actually, so many questions.
Okay.
Two questions, if I may be allowed.
Oh, sure.
So one is consciousness enters at the 7th month, and then you spend the most time you spend. Then seems like from the video, it's more suffering in the womb, right? But then Krishna and both Chaitanya Mahaprabhu have spent 13 months, for example. So that's one question that came to my mind. And then the other is, usually you've seen. You've heard all your life, you've heard of instances of babies smiling in the womb, or you've heard of you've associated the kicks of the baby with
Yeah.
happiness, and in my personal experience also. And then to see something like this,
Yeah.
it's a bit shaky. Yeah, it's shaky.
Yeah.
The understanding that it seems only like it's suffering. Is that true for all in all cases? Couldn't it be that a child could also go through happiness of wanting to experience human life again? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
very,
Right.
very
So,
deeply,
yeah. So Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and for that matter, even Sukadev Goswami. So Sukadev Goswami was in his mother's womb. Some say it's 12 years, some say 16 years. All right. So when he came out of the mother's womb, he was like already a teenager. Right. So they are all spiritual entities, right? So they came into this material world for us. And therefore they don't go through the entire process like what we go through.
Okay.
That's point number one. Point number two is the amniotic fluid and the amniotic sac, right? It's like encapsulating the child. Just imagine I'm put into a balloon today. How happy will that situation be for me? And you can't do anything apart from moving. And the kick on the mom's tummy through the womb, it could be, I'm just speculating, it could be a distress signal to get me out of here. So I have full trust in what Bhagavatam is explaining. So essentially what Bhagavatam is saying is that there are children who can remember their past lives, and not one life, but hundreds of life, and the child is just meditating on the Lord and saying that what am I doing over here? I could have orchestrated my life in a different way, and oh Lord, please don't get me out of this dungeon now, because I'm going to be continuing this entire cycle of birth and death. And the Bhagavad Gita also explains that as much as the a materialist may think that, life on earth is all amazing, but let's not forget birth. Birth is a very painful process, not only for the mother, but also for the child, right? Death, old age. I'm getting old. I'll be 55 this month, and I can feel, it's not the same as what it was when I was 30. And, old age, disease, right? So these are all very, very painful processes. And the child is actually praying to the Supreme Lord that, I want to just focus on dedicating my life to you, because I know there's nothing there. All right. I'm just being put through this cycle again and again. But you know what? The life air pushes us out of our mother's womb. And then we are also forced to forget. We get into the clasp of Maya Devi, and then we forget the promise which we had made, the unborn child had made to the Supreme Lord. What was the promise? So that's how I see it, Mataji.
So,
Of course,
what?
you are a mother. You are a mother, and you have gone through the entire process. You see things, logically very, very differently from the way I see it. I'm just, just following what Bhagavatam is saying, and there's a lot of affinity for a mother. But yeah.
Yeah. So one more thing, very profound. I felt like, so if from 7th month to the birth process, if the child is, if this is the prayer and connection with the Lord that the child is going through, then does that mean a child doesn't make it through birth, is actually being absolved of coming to the earth, or is already like, it's actually sort of a boon for that soul?
It could be,
And
Mataji.
yeah,
It could be.
and then how, what is the concept of before the consciousness coming in, the fetus, the
Mhm.
first 6 months of pregnancy? What is the concept? How is that being described?
So,
In
yeah,
case a child, a mother loses a child at that stage, then
I
how
do
is
not
that?
have an answer to that question, but your earlier question was that the consciousness comes at the 7th month. The way I see it, I may be wrong, is that when the spirit soul enters into the mother through the semen into the mother's womb, remember the spirit soul is always carried by the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. All right. And they are also carrying the karmic reactions from the past life. And the Lord has this option of, temporarily putting it into a cache position, CACHE, switching it off, and then turning it on, at the 7th month. That's how I see it, Mataji. So the first 6, 7 months, the child is not fully developed yet. Okay, let him relax now. Don't worry too much about mind, intelligence, false ego, and all that thing. 7 month onwards, okay, the Lord, if he so desires, he switches on.
No, what I was saying is, so from 7 to birth, and
Yeah.
if a child, I was finding it difficult to say it actually, but doesn't make it alive. Then
No,
is
the child is already alive. It's
no,
just
I'm
that.
saying doesn't come out, doesn't get born. A child
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
dead at
It
birth. So
it could be that that is the last remnants the child has to go through in
go
terms of
through.
suffering. It could be the last remnants, and then that's the
That
last.
was profound. Like imagine the whole
Yeah,
community, everybody around
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah,
birth will look at it as a such a horrible thing to happen, but actually, in a sense,
yeah.
it would
It's
be
a lot so
the
desires. Yeah,
soul is being absolved of
yeah.
going through that birth.
Correct. Yeah. So my Guru Maharaj had actually explained this once. I've also shared in the class before that, sometimes children don't make it, even, beyond 5, 6, 7 years, and that's because whatever karmic reactions there were, that's the final part. And then they go back to home, back to Godhead. Okay. So, let me just continue since we have another few more minutes. Give me a minute, please. Ravi Prabhu, anything you like to share? Anuj Prabhu, anybody else? While
Yeah,
I
the
get my.
point. Yes, Prabhuji. The point you made earlier that this prayer by the unborn child, even even I thought it is done by all the babies, but you said it's not done by every soul. Maybe some fortunate soul, realizes and then they pray to God that let it be, like let it be my last life, and I'll pray to you after coming out. But he forgets everything. So I thought it was done by all the living entities, but it's not, as you said.
Yeah, so this is what I learned from the Prabhuji who was giving the class the other day.
So,
Yeah,
which babies are able to?
I don't know. It could be, maybe those who are more evolved in their spiritual consciousness. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's also, it's a lot of learning for me too. Yeah. So I may not have all the answers, and therefore, um, yeah, we are here together for discussions.
Prabhu,
Yes.
There was just another thing that the child may or may be conscious of his own individual soul
Mhm.
within the confines of the mom and the mom's womb,
Mhm.
but there are also even more gifted children that are conscious of the Paramatma within himself, and Parikshit Maharaj comes to mind. So
Mhm.
it's like um, that kind of that kind of understanding that the soul is bound with the super soul, and that kind of children, well, are extremely gifted, lah, in the sense they're extremely blessed. Or maybe they are supposed to come to earth to fulfill some divine duties, and that's why they have that kind of foresight, that kind of enlightened wisdom, like Parikshit Maharaj, for example.
Well, once again, just so Parikshit Maharaj, he had audience of the Lord, right? Like atom end going around him and protecting him. So Parikshit Maharaj, could be an empowered personality, but the the scriptures, Ravi Prabhu also explain, and sadly we do not know this, right? The scriptures also explain that there are important rite of passage ceremonies, ceremonies before um, at the point of getting married. There are ceremonies which garbhadan, samskaras, they call it samskaras, which one has to do when the couple is ready to conceive. So essentially what they do is, it's very nicely explained that they'll do a yagya, and then they will chant like 16 to 25 rounds of the maha mantra. Essentially what the both couples are doing is they are spiritualizing themselves to such an extent, and then inviting the Lord to please, not inviting the Lord and to take birth in my womb, but inviting the Lord to please send a devotee, all right, whom we can nourish further as our child, right? And I have seen some families who have done that, and you can see the child is completely different from other children, in the sense that this person is just continuing, seamlessly from his last life. He's just able to recite the Shastras in an amazing way. And it's just so spontaneous for that child. All right. So what the couple has done was, this is all very, very subtle. They have invited the Lord, right? So at the point of conception, if the consciousness of the parents invites the the soul with that similar consciousness to come into the womb. Okay, it's that scientific, it's that subtle. All right. So can you imagine someone who conceives the child after being, a night out in the pub, husband and wife, night out in the pub, enjoying, etc., and then the child is born. So the child, they have invited the soul based on their consciousness, right? We do not know all of this, right? We do not know all of this. Only now we are learning all of this, But there are some devotees who engaged in all of this garbhadan, samskaras, etc. To the external world, it might sound like, oh my God, this is crude, it's nonsense. But it works, right? So therefore, this is the meaning of minute independence given to everyone to exercise it. Yeah. And therefore sometimes you wonder, sometimes there's a black sheep in the family who is so different from the rest of the family members. You begin to ask, where did this guy come from? Yeah, where did this guy come from in the family? He's so different from the rest of us. Yes, consciousness of my parents were very, very different at that point in time, possibly. Yeah. And some of the children are like so nice. You are the you are the good great son, Ravinder Prabhu. Your parents are, very, very fortunate to have you. Okay, so with that, we come to the end of the class. You can see there's so much, Rasija Mataji in the Bhagavatam. It's just amazing, right? There's so much to learn in the Bhagavatam. And this is just Canto number 3, chapter number 31. Can you imagine by the time we reach Canto number 12? Yeah. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
jai. All right. So thank you very much, Malti Mataji. Actually, Malti Mataji, Lalita, and I, we were at a party yesterday. Can you believe it? We were at a party. But of course, we were the good ones, very well behaved. Right. So we were at a party and we were organizing games. Like, so this is like, the North Indian, Lakshmi Narayan Temple group, So we have our Sanatan Dharma and we also have the other side of things, which is, doing something for the community, etc. So the three of us are in that community and it was fun.
Yes, Prabhuji, it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Okay, so Lalita was there. Thank you very much, Lalita. Despite all the hard work, you still showed up. Malti also showed up.
Thank you,
Madhu Mataji,
Prabhuji.
Hare
You were a great
Krishna.
MC also.
Oh, yeah. By the way, I also, great MC. Thank you very much.
And you sang very well.
All right, thank you. Deepa Mataji. Thank you very much. Shefali Mataji, Ravi Prabhu, Mahesh Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Krishan Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Bhagwan Ji, Hare Krishna. Okay. I'll be still here for the next 2 weeks and then.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. Probably on the 28th, I will not be taking class because I'll be going to fetch my wife. My wife is actually right now in Kerala. She's at a wellness center, relaxing and enjoying some nice Ayurvedic stuff.
I have how much?
All right. Take care. Hare Krishna, everyone. Hare Bo.
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Prabhu.
Bol.
Okay, now.
Hare Krishna.
Pranam.
Yeah.
Bye.